Parshas Chayei Sara. The beginning of this week's Parsha describes the attempt, successful ultimately, of Avraham Avinu, Abraham, to purchase a burial grounds for his wife, and ultimately for himself and subsequent generations. But he approaches Efron Efron the Hittite, and to buy the field of the Hamachpela. Efron and the Bnei Ches offer the field to Avraham Avinu for free. Avraham refuses. He insists on paying for the field, and he pays a hefty price. He ends up paying 400 shekel kesef, 400 shkolim, and these were not ordinary shkolim. These were, the Gemara in Bava says that these were centurion shkolim. Each shekel was the equivalent of 100 normal shkolim, each of these shkolim. I don't know how much that was. They say it was years of wages or salary. It was a very high price to pay for a field, and relatively speaking, an extremely high price to pay for a field that he could have gotten for free. So the obvious question is, why did Avraham Avinu insist on paying for the field and paying a high price? So Rabbi Soloveichik suggests that the answer lies in an observation of the Gemara on a mishna in Bava. The mishna says, "Hamafkid peros etzel chavero, afilu hein avudin lo yigabahem." Let's talk a little. This is talking about creating a bailment. What's a bailment? You give if a person gives something to another person to watch for the owner of the object, so that creates what's called a bailment. Just to get slightly technical here, the person who deposits the object is called the bailor, and the person who watches the object is called the baili. Bailor, baili. So if somebody, a mafkid in halakhic terminology, a bailor in civil law, deposits an object, in this case, fruits, with his friend, the baili, so the baili is not allowed to touch them, even if they are beginning to deteriorate. Over the passage of time, fruits begin to deteriorate, they rot. He may be able to go to the market and exchange them for money. He can arrest the deterioration by selling them in the market at a somewhat decreased value, but nevertheless he can preserve it. And the Gemara says, no, you can't do that. The Mishnah says you can't do that. The Gemara says, why? My tama. What's the reason? Amar Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana says, Adam rotzeh bekav shelo yoser mitisha kabin shel chavero. A person wants, this is a psychological observation, a person prefers one measure of his own more over 9 measures of his friends. He prefers his own stuff, his own things, more than his friends. And Rashi says it's precious to him because he toiled for it. Now, what is Rashi adding? So, my Rabbi, Rabbi Soloveichik, says Rashi is addressing a question that he doesn't even articulate, which is not unusual for Rashi. But the Gemara quotes Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana says a person prefers his own things, his own stuff, over the stuff of his friends. Well, wait a second. If the Baili takes the nifkad, he takes the peros, the fruits that were deteriorating, and sells them in the market for a price. Let's say he gets 10 shekel for them. To whom does this 10 shekel belong? Belongs to the Bailor. Belongs to the person who gave him the fruits to watch. So how does Rav Kahana's answer resolve the question? It still belongs to the Bailor. So Rashi, according to Rav Ahron, it answers that question by saying, no, there's a difference. The difference is not just the simple legal ownership, but the person toiled for it. He plowed. He watered. He sowed seeds. He protected from insects and from animals. He harvested. He threshed. He milled. He sifted. He invested painstaking efforts in whatever it is. Pick the fruits. Prune the trees. Whatever it is. He invested of himself. He invested, he sacrificed for it. Rav Ahron says there are two types of title to an object or to a field. There's legal title and there's psychological title. Legal title can be easily exchanged, bought, and sold. Psychological title is when a person has a sense of identification with the object or identification with the place, and that comes with sacrifice for that thing, for that place. In the case of the fruits, the sacrifice is direct with his efforts, with all the efforts that we described earlier. In the case of a field, that sacrifice comes from paying a hefty price. So Rav Ahron is saying that when somebody invests, when somebody sacrifices, perhaps even when somebody has Yisurin, the object for which the individual has sacrificed becomes dear to him. Now we can think about this in terms of the items or the categories that the Torah says or that Chazal say are niknes b'Yisurin. Quoting Reb Shimon Bar Yochai in the Gemara in Brachos, Shimon Bar Yochai says, Shalosh matanos tavos nosan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. The Almighty gave three wonderful gifts to the Jews. V'kulan lo nasnan ela al yidei Yisurin. And he gave them all through Yisurin, through suffering. And they are Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. Torah, you have to really work hard in order to understand Torah, to accumulate Torah, to aggregate Torah, to understand Torah. It's not something you can do superficially. It's something that requires serious dedication over a long period of time. Eretz Yisrael, similarly, in order to conquer the land, to dwell in the land, to live in the land, to succeed in the land, to stay in the land, it requires Yisurim, and that's true today. Yisurim of a different type than perhaps 100 years ago. But it's true of today as well, and Olam Haba. Olam Haba is the world to come. Everyone has a place in the world to come, and we earn a beautiful place in the world to come through the effort that we make in this world to do the right thing when it's not easy, whether it's something mundane or something lofty, whether it's being honest when you could easily cut a corner, or whether it's going to minyan when you're tired, or whether it's respecting your parents or others when they give you cause to be annoyed. There's opportunities at every turn, but they're all through discomfort, and one might even say some measure of suffering. And when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, when it comes to Chevron, Rav Ahron says that the key to our connection to Chevron is the sacrifice of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu wanted the Jews to have not only legal title, but psychological title. And it's true about everything. Whatever we invest in, we gain some measure of connection in a deep way that goes beyond the formal ownership. And that's true about raising children as well. When you put your kishkis into raising your children become very dear to you. And then when they do something you don't like, and when they do something that crosses you, it becomes particularly painful, and that's part of the Yisurim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man in such a way that his effort pays off. And Avraham Avinu invested in Chevron, so that on Parshas Chayei Sara, in most years, probably not much this year because of COVID, but in most years, Israelis and others stream to Chevron to show our connection and to show our love because of our connection. And this is all in the schus, in the merit of our forefather, Avraham Avinu, who had the wisdom to understand that we have a deep connection to something not as a result of our legal title, but as a result of the investment that we make to gain psychological title. Have a good Shabbos.